Hi, Pat Pirelli here, and I'm in beautiful Pagosa Springs, Colorado, and we're here at our International Savvy Center. And I want to introduce you today to a young man. His name is Nate Bowers. I met Nate when he was 12 years old. He's almost 24 now, so that was about 12 years ago. And what I'm going to do is introduce you to a young man that I believe is really going to influence and help make the world a better place for horses and humans in the driven horse world. This is for anything that you want to do with a horse, that you want a single horse or teams, or all the way up into, or pairs rather, all the way up into heavy harness teams. You know, a lot of people today are getting very interested in driving horses, and a lot of people make the same mistake they make with horses, with the ridden horse. They think just catch them any way they can, saddle them up and get on, kick them to go and pull them to stop, and let's see what happens. And that is not the thing to happen, not the thing you want to have happen in the driven world. I personally have been in a few wrecks. I have seen many, many wrecks. So prior and proper preparation is what prevents poor performance. Now let me tell you a little something about this young man. I met him when he was 12 because his father, Steve Bowers, was probably the most natural horseman that I knew with the driven horse. He was not only natural with the horses, but he had a gifted way of explaining it to the world. To the person who had never been around it, he had figured out little sayings and diagrams and things for people to really understand what they needed to know, to be totally prepared, and to have fun and achieve excellence with their driven horse. So not only that, here a few years back, Steve passed away suddenly, and I invited Nate to come down and spend a little bit of time with us in the summer. And I was really impressed with how he went on with what his dad's work was. So I said, come out to Florida and work with the externs there and see if they are interested in the driving horses. Well, not only was I impressed with how good he was with the horses, but how well he explained it, how succinct his ideas were, and how much now I realized that he had paid attention to his father.
I think one of the neatest things that you and my dad had in common was the real desire to put principles to purpose and to really put a horse to a good job where he can really feel like he has a purpose. And you know, things like hauling the logs or spreading manure or mowing a field, it just does an amazing thing for a horse, that's for sure.
And I think it's good for man and beast because the human also gets a focus of not just where they want to go, but the whole picture, what they're wanting to accomplish. And then this is where we can get in a learning frame of mind, and this is the ultimate advice. Do your thinking at night so you can just feel what you need to do during the day.
For sure, yep.
So to get on with the rest of the program, I want to hand it over to Nate Bowers.
Thanks, Pat. I'm really looking forward to putting this program together for everybody. The first horse I ever got to train, I was actually 8 years old. My dad had me start training horses professionally for money to drive, and that was my first interaction with it. And from there, I had quite a good little going business for quite a few years, training driving horses. And so a lot of what I learned in those years as a kid, just trying to figure out the puzzle of how to put things together for my horses to be able to drive. My dad was a really natural horseman, and he had a lot of skills that he passed on to me and taught me a lot about being able to set things up for the horse's sake. So that's where I get a lot of my education, and a lot of my skills that I have are from what he taught me. I first came to Pirelli and met Pat, I think it was like in 2000 was when we first met him, and it was a really neat experience. My dad was really talented, but he was always seeking a better way. He was very much a never-ending self-improvement kind of a guy, which was really cool because when I met Pat, Pat was very similar because Pat was really latched into really trying to learn from my dad, and my dad was really into learning from Pat. And so it made a really neat relationship where my dad and I really got to learn a lot of foundational things from Pat, and were able to really develop that sort of relationship. I started traveling with my dad right after 7th grade. I had a really hard time in school, and so my dad, he encouraged me to actually drop out of school and to go into a private school through correspondence. So I did all of my education through correspondence, and that left me free to be able to travel with him and to be able to train horses and to be able to do horses with him pretty much all day long. So from 7th grade on, I was able to do that. And we would travel down to the Pirelli Center in Florida, and we would come up here, and we would help Pat with some of his driving horses up here and try and move forward Pat's vision of having horsepower here on the ranch. So I kind of worked as my dad's lead protege, so to speak, for a lot of years until I was 18 years old and he died. He had a brain aneurysm, and he was 52 years old, and it was just a real shocker. He was a very very athletic, healthy person, but the brain aneurysm is something that you just can't see coming. So he had that, and I was faced with the decision. I had to decide whether I was either gonna go to college and get an education, or if I was gonna take the education that my dad had given me and what I'd learned about horses, and if I was gonna apply that and try and build his business and continue his business. So since then, I made the decision not to go to college, and I finished my high school degree, and I got my, I guess it's not really a degree, I got my high school diploma, and then I went on to train and to teach. And so then I came down here. Pat called me when I was 19 to come down and help with some horses that he wanted to get started driving. I got to start Zeus, which was an unbelievable experience. My wife, who was not my wife at that point, had put a ton of time into him, and he was just so ready to be driven, and it was really a really great experience because it made me look really good. All the time she put in made me look really good. So I was able to start that horse. I also was able to help restart the Blue Team and got them on a really successful path driving. So I did that when I was 19 and continued to work with Pat ever since. My wife and I, we actually fell for each other during that time and ended up getting married. I think I was 20 years old at that point. So that brings us up to today, where now I travel around and my wife travels around, and we work together trying to teach people how to train horses naturally. So my whole program and everything that I do is not sport specific, it's foundation specific. The idea is that I'm trying to train horses naturally to drive. I'm not trying to create a performance driving horse. You could take a horse that has a good foundation and turn it into a performance driving horse, but that's not my goal or my vision. My goal and my vision is to really be able to start horses to where they have a really good, solid understanding of being driven, to where they could go in any direction anybody would want, but mostly that the horse would enjoy his job and that people could enjoy it too, and they could spend lots of time and have a nice, long experience and career with this horse where the horse enjoyed being with them and he really enjoyed being driven. So that's kind of where I would like to go with this video. With this video, we really want to put it out there to help people get the prior and proper preparation to where they can really put it together to where it's really simple for the horse, where the horse will get all the little pieces, put them together, and it'll make sense. The way that I really look at it is I look at it as a puzzle. Driving is just a puzzle. There's pressure all around the horse that the horse needs to understand. He's got pressure in front of him that he needs to understand. He's got pressure behind him, to the left and to the right, and we're behind him asking him to do what we say. And there's a lot to that. And so I really, really want to use as much horsemanship and psychology as I can to break that down to where it's in the smallest pieces possible, to where it's a very educational and very easy for the horse to grasp, so we can put it all together for the horse in a very simple way. Let me introduce you to my wife, Amy Bowers. She was formerly Amy Book, but now she's Amy Bowers, and I'm darn proud of it. I first met her when I was 14 years old, and we were training some horses together. She was one of Pat's proteges, and I was hook, line, and sinker since then. So I kind of always tease, I say I went for the best student that I thought Pat had, and I looked for her, and I found her, and so I married her. So, but Amy has a pretty rich history within driving and within the Pirelli program, and we'll go ahead and let her tell you about that.
Well, a little known fact about me is that I actually grew up on a Belgian breeding farm back in California, and one of my family's businesses was actually doing driving horses. We would do carriage rides and also weddings and all kinds of things, Christmas caroling. So I got to know driving horses from a very young age, and unfortunately I got to see some really negative things in my time with it. My family was pretty good with horses and we always had a lot of success. But there was, when we would go to shows and whatnot, we got to see some really unfortunate things, and it definitely gave me a huge respect for driving, for how dangerous it can be, because it's such a wonderful, fun thing, but when it goes wrong, it's one of the worst things I've ever seen. I never want that to happen to anybody else. And I ended up meeting Nate here at the Pirelli Ranch, and I've been coming here since I was 9 and studying it, and I'm now an instructor, as also...
4-star too.
I'm a 4-star instructor, yep.
Mm-hmm.
So we got married just a few years ago, and so I'm just so excited here to be able to present a natural way to driving.
So when we're talking about training a driving horse, one of the first things that we really need to think about is having a really clear definition in our mind and a really clear difference in our mind between our foundation and our specialization. A lot of people really get confused and they have a lot of trouble in their relationship with their horse and driving because they really get the two confused. They think that the foundation or like your normal foundational things, and your horse's understanding of pressure and driving are one and the same. But I really see them as two different things. They're complementary by all means, but they're not the same thing. So what's really important is that as we're talking about training a horse to drive, that we keep a very, very clean understanding in our minds about the difference between our foundation and our specialization. So the way that I would define your specialization would be anything that had to do with the sight, the sound, or the feel of being driven. If I was going to define your foundation, I'd define it as your horse's understanding of pressure and your horse's understanding of the world. So if you were driving along and you came to a stream and your horse stops and you wanted him to continue to go, and he goes, no, I'm not going to go across the stream, then that wouldn't be a driving problem, right? That would be a foundational problem. The foundation is that your horse isn't environmentally confident. He's not confident with that particular environmental obstacle. So the thing that you must not do is try and fix the foundational problem with your specialization. So the worst thing you could do in my mind is sit there and try and punch your horse across the stream while he's still being driven, because the two things are so different. And then what'll happen is that you'll put a lot of pressure on your horse to get him to go across the stream, and all of a sudden the horse runs off and you wonder why he did, and now he's got a specializational problem as well as a foundational problem. And it's kind of like driving becomes the innocent victim. We hear stories all the time of somebody that had the horse driving really great and they drive past a trash bag and it flutters in the wind and the horse takes off running. And they wonder why he ran off, and they blame it on his driving, and it had nothing to do with driving. The runaway had nothing to do with it. It had everything to do with his foundation and his understanding of pressure. A really neat thing that Pat's introduced us all to are the 8 principles. And principle number 7 is one that I really like to think about in reference to training a driving horse. Principle number 7 is horses teach humans, humans teach horses. And that's something that really interests me, because when you think about it, a lot of people, the way that they learn to drive is they learn to drive while they train a horse to be driven. And that's actually a really, really hard way to do it. So I really advise everybody out there to make sure that you're also learning to drive as you're playing with training your horse to drive, so that you can really have a good foundation in your own understanding of driving. It's kind of like if I told you you were going to learn to ride a horse while you started a horse to ride. It seems pretty crazy to think about doing that. But with driving, people do it all the time. So I really would like to be a culture, and for us to have a culture that we didn't do that, where we were the kind of people who learned to drive and had horses who already knew how to drive teach us how to drive. So when we talk about the foundation, it's really important that we have a horse. Amy, you can go ahead and play with your horse. We have a horse that's really, really thinking with us and trying to be a really good puzzle solver. Because of the fact that our specialization is just a puzzle. That's all that it is. Driving's just a skill and a puzzle that we really need our horse to understand. And so to get our horse to understand the puzzle, we first have to have them being a puzzle solver. And we really have to have the horse thinking about how to work with us and how to solve whatever the puzzle is that we put in front of them. If we had a horse that couldn't figure out a simple puzzle with, say, a green ball or with a tarp or with a barrel, then there's no way that we could really honestly expect that horse to be able to solve a really complex puzzle like being driven. One of the most common things that people ask me is they say, what do you think is the best horseanality to be driving? They always ask, they go, what do you think, do you think a left brain extrovert's best or a right brain introvert's best or anything like that? And my answer to that is that my real belief is that you need to have a centered horse. The centered horse is the right horse. Any horse that has extreme behaviors on any one of the horseanality quadrants, left brain, right brain, introvert, extrovert, it doesn't really matter in my mind. If it's a severe behavior within any of those things, then the horse isn't really ready to be a driving horse, because driving is such a delicate and really deep subject that we're going to play with here. So as we're talking about teaching a horse how to drive, it's really important that we really break it down into the categories and what the horse really needs to know, accept, and understand. I talk a lot about a horse accepting certain things and understanding them. Accepting, I would think of more like in the terms of friendly game, like he knows what it is and he knows what it means, and it doesn't mean for him to need to move or to need to do anything. It's just that he accepts it as a normal part of life, which is great. Where like a lot of people, if you look at the way they train a horse to drive, they just get the horse to accept a lot of things, but he doesn't really understand them. Which in my mind, accepting things is really great if you just want to stand still. You can see my horse right now just standing here hanging out with me. She's just accepting all the pressure. She's not understanding anything. She's not moving into anything, and she's not moving off of anything. But that's where the real challenge comes, because I really believe to help a horse be a really competent driving horse, we really need to make sure that we isolate and break down each thing and not only get the horse to accept them, but also to understand them. We don't want to be cheating the horse to where we're forcing him to understand it. We want to really set it up to where the horse learns his responsibility within these pressures. If you look at the pressures that I put onto my horse, I have pressure on the front of my horse with my breast strap, and that's a friendly pressure. My horse should just be able to have it there, but also to be able to move into it when I ask her to. She needs to have the understanding of that. So then we also have pressure along either side of our horse, along the left and the right of the horse. And this is also the same thing. It's a friendly pressure in that it's going to be, we don't want a horse to be needing to move off of it. We want it to be that he can just hang out and feel it here along his side, but then as soon as it becomes active, to know to step off of it. So it's one part friendly, one part steady pressure or porcupine pressure. And then we've also put pressure here on the back end of our horse. And on the back end of the horse, it's the same thing as on the front, where we need it to be a friendly pressure as the horse travels, but also to be a porcupine pressure that the horse knows he needs to move into when he's asked to. And then there's one more thing too, and that's what we call communication or leadership from zone 5. So like right here, I have a lead rope on my horse, and I'm giving my horse its leadership from zone 1, 2, right? Up in front of the horse. And this is actually really easy for a horse, but we take it to a whole new challenging level when we put 2 reins on the horse and we try and go all the way behind the horse. So what we want to think about as we break this down, we really want to think about it as accept and understand the harness, accept and understand the vehicle, and then accept and understand leadership from zone 5. It's really important that we put it together in all these steps, and each step is very important. As you go along, you can really feel free to, if your horse is having a really hard time accepting and understanding the harness, that doesn't mean that you can't play with your horse accepting and understanding leadership from zone 5 or accepting and understanding the vehicle. So it's really important that you realize all these things, it's broken down in such an isolation, or the idea is for it to be in such an isolation, that you can play with each aspect independently of one another. So that if one chain link hasn't really built up strong enough, that doesn't really make it a real thing of consequence, because you can wait for this one to get better while you play with this one over here. And so you can kind of build it all up to where it's all a really solid understanding for your horse. So as we're isolating all these things that we're talking about, what we really want to do is we really want to look for feedback from our horses. We really want to see, okay, does this horse accept and understand this pressure, or is it kind of going a little right brain with it? Is it kind of confusing it? So what we want to do is we want to break it down as much as we can. So within accept the harness, the first thing that we want our horse to really accept and understand would be the surcingle. The understanding that we're looking for our horse to have with the surcingle is just that it's friendly pressure. It should not mean porcupine game to our horse. It shouldn't mean anything yielding at all. It should just be the same as the cinch on your saddle. So I'll put this on here. So when you do this at home, what you're looking to see is you're looking to see no effect on your horse. It should be just as natural and as comfortable wearing this surcingle as it is in any other thing that you ask it to do. So your horse should be able to move just as fluidly and freely with the surcingle on as it does without the surcingle. If you put the surcingle on and you notice your horse is kind of humpy or a little slower moving or something like that, then it's a really good feedback for you that you should not push your horse past that, and that you should give it the time to learn to truly accept the surcingle. If you guys ever go to a harness sale, they'll always have some smart-ass guy who'll stand up and hold up one of these things right here. And what he'll say is, he'll say, "Does anybody here know what this is?" And some poor unsuspecting soul will say, "That's a crupper right there." And then he'll say, "Every horse's ass knows what that is," right? So what we want to do is make sure that our horse's hind end really does know what this is and what to do with it. The crupper is a very misunderstood piece of equipment. It anchors our harness onto our horse's hind end, but it really requires the horse to give a porcupine response or a steady pressure response. It requires the horse to move its tail up, okay? If your horse takes a crupper and it moves its tail down or holds its tail down, it's gonna have tension there and it's not going to be able to truly relax with the crupper. So what we wanna do is we wanna prepare our horses to understand the crupper. What's really important is that this is actually a really dangerous thing to propose to do with your horse. This is why it's really important that you have your foundation be really strong before you start to propose to do this. You need to have your horse to where it'll allow you into the area around where your crupper is going to be, and also to where it'll allow you into where your crupper is actually going to be and lift its tail. Can you see how I can get her to lift her tail there? So that's the right start to the response that we're looking for, okay? So the way that we're gonna teach this horse to accept and understand the crupper is by first teaching it the steady pressure response that it needs to have towards it. So the way that we'll do that is we'll start with a 12-foot lead rope. The nice thing about a 12-foot lead rope, instead of using your whole body of your harness, is that it's soft and it's safe. If the horse kind of went right-brained on you and started kicking or had a real problem with it, this lead rope's not going to be a big deal. If you had your harness on here and your horse started kicking, it could be a very big deal. So we want to make sure that we're setting our horse up for as much success as possible. If you had a horse that did not accept you back here, then it would be really important that you did not try to put a crupper under its tail. Okay, it's really important just for safety's sake that the foundation is just that he'll allow you in here and he'll allow you to play with his tail, okay? So what we'll do when we want to introduce the crupper is we'll take our 12-foot lead rope and we'll just make a nice big loop. If you look at this loop here, it's the same as the crupper, only it's going to be a little softer and a little bit thinner. And what we want to do is we want to teach our horse to lift his tail when he feels it underneath his tail. So what we do is we take and we just lay it over our horse's hind end like that. And then we take and we just rock the horse's tail out. See, a lot of people don't know this, but it's real easy to rock a horse's tail to the side, and it's not terribly easy to lift it straight up. That makes sense? His muscling, if you watch them in the pasture, they sit here and they rock their tails back and forth and back and forth. They don't tend to do a lot of lifting them up in the air. Go ahead and rock the horse's tail into the crupper here. Then we just slide it up into the same position that it's going to be in with the real crupper. Then we can come up here to where we're in a safer zone. And then what we'll do is we'll ask our horse to walk forward. And when the horse is in motion, it naturally lifts up its tail and the crupper falls out. Okay? So then what we've just shown our horse is that when it feels that pressure, what it needs to do is lift its tail and the pressure will go away. Okay? We've taught her to lift her tail with the crupper. Okay? So what's really important here is the foot motion. Okay, we really need our horse's feet to move. If you guys ever go roping or something like that and you get your rope underneath your horse's tail, the first thing you'll learn if he clamps down on it is to get his feet moving. Okay, when the feet move, it'll naturally relax the tail and the tail will lift up and your rope will fall out. If you stop him, he'll buck or kick. Okay, so it's really important that when we get the crupper up underneath there, or in this case, our really simple crupper, which is just a rope, then what we do is we get the horse to move its feet, the tail lifts up, and it just falls right out nice and softly. So let me go ahead and reset my horse here. Good. So again, I'll get my loop all ready, lay it up over her butt, rock the tail through, lift the crupper up, and we'll ask our horse to move forward, and the tail loosens and the crupper falls out. Some horses, they're going to really need to move their feet before the tail will loosen, and that's all right. We just want to make sure that we really emphasize that the way the horse gets rid of the crupper is to lift his tail and the crupper falls out. So before we introduce the britchin and the breast strap, it's really important that we understand a concept. This concept is what's called suspension in the hitch. I define suspension in the hitch as the latency between the pulling and braking systems. And optimal suspension in the hitch is where there is no latency, there is no time between pulling and braking. So a little demo and a little something you can do at home is you can try this with a friend. I've got Amy here, and you'll see that she's got a loop of rope, and the rope is going across the front of her hips and back to the fence. Okay, this rope replicates what would be the equivalent of your breast strap and your traces. Okay, and then I'm going to take this rope and I'm going to put it up over top of her head, and it's going to go across the backside of her, making it to where she is now in between the braking system, which would be me, which would be the britchin, and the pulling system, which would be the fence, right, which is the breast strap, and this would be the britchin. So suspension in the hitch is the latency between. Okay, so if Amy was to be pulling a load and come up, like kind of lean this way, pulling a load, so she's in the load, she's pulling along, good. And then say we had our horse hitched too loose to where there was a ton of latency between pulling and braking systems. And then she was to go down a hill, so lean back without moving your feet. There you go, good, now lean forward again. Can you see how she has a moment, now lean back again. I'm not gonna move my hands, there you go, now lean forward again, good. Very good. So you can see how she has a moment of no pressure whatsoever. And that's, how's that feel there, Amy?
It's very unsettling. There's no direction. I feel like I'm almost going to fall.
Okay, good. Yeah, so it kind of makes you feel like you're going to fall. And this is a really great thing to try at home. You can try it and see what that feels like, and you'll feel it. It's like, where is it going to, oh, there it is. It caught me, right? And that's a really, really, really weird feeling. And your horse will feel that way too. And a lot of times I feel like people really kill a horse's confidence by not hitching them tight enough. So now if we were going to try it again where this time she's hitched snugly or optimally hitched, right? Where she's got no latency between pulling and braking. It's equal, right? And then she was to pull, so push into it. Good, and then she was to go backward. It's immediately onto the brakes. So as she goes forward, go forward again. Good, she hasn't completely lost the britchin. The britchin is still there. It's not loose like it was before. It's still there to where if she was to slow down, imagine she's a horse walking along, or back up, that she wouldn't have a big moment of float. Okay, and that moment of float is what we don't want. So the reason this is important is that we really need to prepare our horses as we introduce the britchin and the breast strap for suspension in the hitch. So as we go along, what you'll see is we're going to start to put our horses together in these two suspensions, or in these two feels, where the horse can learn them as a friendly feel. Because as the horse goes along, it needs to be that there's pressure on the front and the back, and that can be a new neutral for the horse. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and introduce a britchin to the horse, and I just want you to really remember this as we keep going on. Okay. So we're preparing our horse to accept and understand the harness. So far we've gotten our horse to accept and understand the surcingle, and we've gotten our horse to accept and understand the crupper. The next thing that we're going to add in is we're going to ask the horse to accept and understand the britchin. So the britchin is kind of a unique one because it needs to be friendly to the horse as he's traveling, but then it also, when it becomes active, it needs to become a steady pressure that the horse knows how to move into. If your horse has not been prepared, foundationally speaking, with ropes and all kinds of things, being accepting of things on and behind zone 5, then the britchin is going to be too much for them. So it's really important that you really look at your foundation. You say, is my horse really accepting and understanding things back there? Okay? So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and throw our harness on. We'll put our surcingle on. Now it's got my britchin and my crupper attached. The way we'll put this on is we'll put it up on her back and not put it down over her hind end. The last thing we want to do is not have this all in place when she first feels it. The reason for that is if she first feels it and then takes a big jump, then the whole harness is going to get knocked off and maybe she'll drag it around or something terrible like that. So what I would like to do is set her up for as much success as possible. And the way that we do that is by setting the harness up on her back like that, to where the britchin is up here right where the good Lord sewed her together, right there at her loin. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do our girth. And what's really important is that I'm paying really close attention to my horse as I'm going along here. And if she gives me feedback where she says stop, I say, okay, sounds great. It's really important that if your horse is saying, I'm not confident with this, you need to stop, that you go back and try and play with it in another way. What you really don't want to do is create a driving problem by trying to fix a foundational problem with your specialization. The two are separate, so we got to keep them really clear and different in our minds. That if my horse had a hard time just with all this messy spaghetti up on her back, then that's a foundational problem. And I should not try and fix that with more harness. That makes sense? So what we'll do is when we've got our surcingle on here, nice and snug, then we'll go ahead and come back here and we'll pet our horse's hind end, make sure she's accepting of us back here, and then we'll just slide our britchin down into place. You notice that it's just kind of hanging here. Some horses, that might be a lot of pressure for them. If your horse gives you feedback and says that that's a lot of pressure, you have to go back. You need to not continue on. You need to stop and play with that with your friendly game, right? So if our horse checks out and she goes, oh yeah, I accept and understand this, britchin just being back here, sitting here, then I can go ahead and put my crupper on. Remember to rock the tail out. Pull the tail out to where now the britchin and the crupper are underneath my horse's tail. There's nothing wrong with if you get to this point right here and your horse gives you feedback and says, hey, I'm not really that great with the crupper, then go back and play with it like we did earlier. So we've got our britchin now on our horse, but it's not really on our horse. Can everybody see how it's just kind of sitting there like it's just kind of hanging there? It's not really active at all and it's not really touching her, okay? So what we need to do is we need to pull it up to where it can actually have a little bit of feel for her to give her a good setup for being in the vehicle. It's kind of the equivalent of if I was touching her and I was just kind of floating my hand and not really touching her versus really touching her and putting my hand on the horse. So this is just kind of floating in there. It's not really on the horse. What we're going to do is I'll show you how to set it up to where you can actually get it to where it has pressure on the horse in a friendly way. Good girl. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to this side and I'm going to pull my hold back down and bring it back here and put it through my shaft loop and then buckle it back onto itself right like that there. Then I can come around to the other side. You'll notice that my britchin is still loose, okay? The first time that you do this with your horse, think of it like the first time you put a cinch on him, okay? You can get the same sort of explosive response from this as you can from putting a cinch on to a cinchy horse for the first time. So we want to be really careful and really aware of what we're doing and really aware of where our horse's mental state is at, okay? So then we'll go ahead and put the hold back through the shaft loop on this side and we'll bring it back and we'll buckle it in. See, the neat thing about rigging a horse up like this is now he can feel his way through the pressure. Okay, before, if we would have left it undone, then the harness, if the horse had maybe started to lope or something like that, might jiggle off to the left or jiggle off to the right. With this, like this, it makes the britchin tight against her hind end, and that keeps the harness from coming off of her. Okay, so this is the friendly pressure that we really want to develop in our horse. We want our horse to be able to have this pressure going around her hind end to just be neutral. This is her new neutral, is this pressure. So it's the same as what we were talking about with the surcingle. If you feel like you put this on your horse and it moves differently, or can't lope as nice, or can't stop the same, or can't hold its feet still, then it's just really good feedback that your horse does not accept and understand the friendly pressure of the Brichin. Okay, so what we really want to have is we want the understanding for a horse with this friendly pressure on the Brichin to be super clear. It needs to be really clear that the horse doesn't think of it as something it needs to move off of, but it thinks of it as a friendly pressure, that it just is the new neutral, is wearing a Brichin rigged up like what we showed you. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that the horse can have that pressure in motion and standing still. Just make sure that you're really letting your horse move out and allow it to go run and play and buck and do whatever it needs to do to feel its way through it. Now, the idea behind that is that it's safe because of the fact that you've got it rigged up in a way where he can buck with it and he won't buck it up over top of his ears. I saw a gal one time who did not put the holdbacks on like what we did right there, and her horse took a big buck and he bucked it up over top of his ears, and he ended up having it in front of him. He got his front feet stuck in it. So it's just a wreck that you don't need to have happen. What I do is you set them up like this and they can feel their way through it, and they can be exuberant or whatever they want to be, and it's okay. It won't make it a wrong thing for the horse. So once we have that acceptance really, really good, then we want to move into a really clear understanding for the horse of what it needs to do with the porcupine pressure on its hind end. Okay, so it's friendly pressure as the horse travels along, but if it becomes active by asking the horse either to slow the vehicle, stop the vehicle, or back the vehicle, we need it to know to move into that pressure. So the way that we'll teach that is like this. We've got this set of long lines here. These are 18-foot long lines. The reason we use 18 foot is so that we can get out in front of the horse far enough to be really remote from him. What we want it not to be is we don't want it to be going off of our suggestion. We want it to be going off of the pressure on the horse's hind end. It's really important that we have a really clean isolation and that we don't cheat our horse's learning by getting him to back up just by bringing our energy up. We need to really isolate and get the horse to understand to back up off of the Brichin pressure. So that's why we use a little bit longer rope, so that we can be out in front of the horse far enough to be more remote controlling, is the way I would call it. So if we take our long lines and we run one of the lines through our shaft loop and then snap it in, then we can lay the other one up over top of her wither here. So we'll lay that up over top, and then we'll switch sides here. We'll do the same thing here. We'll run through the shaft loop into the D ring on the Brichin. Then we can take this line down. And what we've done is we've just created a nice big loop around our horse's hind end that we can control from in front of zone 1. Okay, good. So what's really important is that we keep a really clear isolation for our horse. What I don't want to do is cheat my horse the opportunity to learn this. So what I want to do is I want to make it really clear that my phase 1 is a porcupine game. And just be really careful. A lot of you guys with higher level horses, what you'll accidentally do is you'll go like this and you'll draw your horse forward to you. Okay? We need to make sure that we're not drawing and we're staying really neutral with our bodies. We'll pull up the slack evenly on our 2 Brichin reins here, and we'll put a little pressure, and we'll see what our horse naturally does. So you see what my horse did right there, she came forward, okay? So that's really good feedback. What that tells me is that my horse thinks that the pressure on zone 5 there means porcupine game with the pressure, not against the pressure. Does that make sense? She's looking to find her release in front of her instead of looking to find her release behind her. So what I need to do is to help her find it behind her, not in front of her. So what I'll do is, we all know that pressure motivates and the release teaches. So if I put a little pressure on here, and if she comes forward, I'll just wiggle my rope, and I don't put more pressure and I don't put less pressure. I just wiggle my rope until the horse steps back, and then the pressure with the steady pressure goes off. Right, I'll do it again. So I'll put a little pressure on the britchin, and we'll see what my horse's natural response is. See, she already changed her mind about it. This time she's not leading forward, which is really good. But there she comes forward, so I go wiggle, 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 get back, like that. Good. Okay? So what I want her to do is to start thinking about finding her release behind her instead of in front of her. Okay, so that's a really good right there. Can everybody see what she did right there? Right there, what she did was she started to think into the pressure, and she held her feet still that time instead of coming forward with the pressure. That's good, but that's not the ultimate picture. If we ended right there, then that would just be a friendly game. We want it to be a porcupine game. We want it to be that the horse doesn't just feel this and stop his feet. I want the horse to feel this and move backward, okay? It's a response. We're seeking a response. We're not seeking a friendly game. So what we'll do is we'll go again. And what we're looking to have is I want my horse to connect it to her feet to think backward. But there she thinks forwards, and my rhythmic pressure just helps her think backwards. So she comes up here and I go, nope, sorry. No release up here for you. Okay, so I'll put a little pressure on. I'll say, not forward, like that. I'll put a little pressure on, and then not forward. See, she has a really strong thought process that says, oh, the release must be up there, which is what most people's horses have. But we really need to isolate this and really help them understand that the release is behind her. The release isn't in front of her. So there she's kind of doing a nice job of thinking of it as a friendly game. She's just standing there pushing into it. So if she's doing that, I really want to activate her feet, and I want to go move your feet. So my rhythmic pressure helps support my steady pressure. Okay? So I just go again, and I'm saying think to your feet. Don't come forward. Think to your feet and go backward. I want to be able to pick this up and have her respond by backing up. So I'll put a little pressure here. That's sideways. Nice offer, but it's not the right offer. So what I never want her to do, what I never want to do, is to make her feel wrong for offering me something so nice. Okay? Because sideways or forward or any of those things are really valuable, great things for our horses to have. But we want to be able to isolate it and say, okay, thanks for the offer, but what I'm really looking for is a response into the pressure. So that's really important, that I don't make her feel wrong for coming forward. I go, nope, sorry, wrong answer. So I just equal what she's doing. So if she was kind of bracing really hard, then I'd put a little more pressure on. But if she's just being soft like this, then I just softly say thanks, but no thanks. Put a little pressure on. I can go a little quicker now that she's starting to understand the game, to where I can hopefully get it to where I could pick up this britchin pressure and have her respond backward. Good. Got to make sure you watch for those little tries in her. And what I'm thinking about here is I'm thinking about getting, oh, there, that was a really good one. That was a really good one. What I'm trying to get here is I'm trying to get her thinking to her feet. We really need her to start thinking about, how do I connect that pressure to my feet? I don't want her just to stand here and brace against it. I want her to activate her feet. So even if this isn't a real heavy, ooh, see that? That talked right to her feet. Even if this isn't a real heavy pressure at first, it'll develop into it. For right now, I'm just trying to say, can you connect the britchin, which is these two bright white and red ropes here, britchin to your feet? Can you connect them in the right way? Not for forward, but for backward. There, right there. See, that was a really good little try there. Perfect. Sometimes you'll feel the horse try, and you wouldn't be able to see it, but you could feel it in your hand. You got to make sure that you really release for that, so that the horse really gets the idea that you're paying attention. There, right like that right there. That was perfect. So right there, she really thought right to her feet and in the right way. See, that's all sideways. That's not backwards. That was backwards. So the neat thing is that you can take this and play with it and develop it up to a really high level. You could get it to where you can play your yo-yo game with your horse using the britchin. You could ask the horse to back out to the end of the circle or to the end of your rope using your britchin like that. See that connection to the foot? Very good. So I could ask her to back out, and I can help her if she doesn't get it. There. Very good. And then when she got out there, then I could draw her back to me. And we could play with isolating the britchin pressure and the pressure on her head. Okay. So hopefully we have our horse to a point where he really understands all these pressures that we've introduced. He understands the surcingle, the crupper, and the britchin. The britchin being kind of one of the most important ones because really it's going to be very active as he drives. It's not just going to sit there and be friendly like the other two pressures we've talked about. It's going to be much more active where it's going to be asking him to be responding into it a lot. The next thing we're going to add in is going to be the breast strap. And it's going to be the exact same thing in that it's going to be asking the horse a lot to move into it. It's also friendly, and a lot of horses can have a hard time with it in just a friendly capacity. But it's more importantly, it's a porcupine game that the horse has to understand to seek the release in front of it and not to seek the release behind it. Okay? So what we'll do here at first is we're going to talk about how to get the horse to really understand it in a friendly way. If you think about our horse being hitched in the vehicle, we're going to have pressure on the front and pressure on the back at all times, and that's going to be the new neutral. So what we want to do is prepare our horse for that new neutral in getting this as a very friendly pressure to our horse first. So what we'll do is I'll go ahead and put this on my horse. The way most people put a breast strap onto a horse is that they come up underneath the horse. Okay, what that naturally does is it's going to lift his head up and it's going to help him not relax. A lot of horses really hate the way people put a breast strap on because of the way they do it. The way that I've learned to do it is if you take it and you actually stick it up over top of the horse's neck, then it just rotates around there and he doesn't even know that he got it put on. So we can put that on. So you notice that it's friendly there, but it's not very friendly. It's not a very good hugging pressure. It's just kind of floats there, and it's not safe for the horse to move around and feel its way through this. You can see that if she stuck her head down, she could get her feet through it. She could do a lot of things to really get her hurt. So what we want to do is rig it up in a way where she can feel her way through it and not get herself hurt. Okay, so the way we're going to rig our horse up to be really comfortable in the breast strap and the whole harness to where it can feel both pressures at the same time, the britchin pressure and the collar pressure, is that we'll take and we'll put ourselves a savvy string right here through where our buckle-in traces go. We'll go underneath the shav loop, and then we'll go ahead and grab our hold back and bring it through and buckle it back onto itself. So what we've just done is we've just put our horse into a loop. You can see it goes from the britchin up through our savvy string and our hold back, through the breast strap, and then around on the other side. So it creates a loop that'll keep this collar safe for my horse. If she put her head down with it now, it'll stay up and she won't run the risk of getting herself with her legs caught through it. So I can go ahead and do the other side. So I'll do the same thing over here. I'll just pull my savvy string through, go behind or underneath my shav loop, and I'll grab a hold of my hold back, and I'll be ready to put her in here. Now I want to do this the same way that I did before with the britchin, where I want to be really careful because you can accidentally really stop your horse up a little bit. You can cause a little trouble, kind of like putting the first cinch on. So you want to be making sure that your horse is in a good frame of mind mentally and that he's all right to have a little pressure on there. We'll start off with it really loose, like that. You can see that there's pretty much no tension. It's really loose on there, but she's still got it to where it's more hugging, it's more holding on to her. And as she gets to where she accepts this amount of pressure, I'll add a little bit more and a little bit more so that she can be really tightly in there and have both the pressure on the front and the back at the same time, which is the exact same as it's going to be when she's in the vehicle. Again, the neat thing about this is that you can hit your horse, or you can play with your horse in all the normal things that you do with your horse. You can play all 7 games, you can do anything, you can take them over a jump, you can do all kinds of stuff with them rigged up like this because it's safe. They're not going to be able to get this off if they kind of had an exuberant moment or a right brain moment. So we want to just set them up to where they won't ever get a real negative experience with this. We've got our horse now loosely in our harness. We've got the breast strap, the britchin, and the holdbacks on there that are kind of loosely holding her. As she travels, there's not a lot of pressure. And what I want to do is I want to ask her to move around a little bit and see what level of acceptance she has. Does she show her normal level of impulsion, all those sorts of things? It's kind of like a 3-step cinching to where you're going to do this over a process. We want to put a little bit of pressure on, get the horse to move around, and then when we felt like our horse was pretty relaxed and that it wasn't bothering the horse at all, then we could go ahead and come in here and we could put a little more pressure on here. And just remember that the response we're looking to get is no response. We're looking for it to mean to the horse neutral, to where now she's pretty tight in here. There's a fair bit of pressure in here, and we want her to still be able to move around with the same level of rhythm, relaxation, and contact as she had before. So hopefully at this point we have our horse to where he really understands the pressure on the front of his body and the back of his body. Now we're going to start to introduce the pressure on the sides of his body. This pressure is what we call lateral trace pressure or shaft pressure. This is the pressure that we were talking about before that really causes the horse to have to stay straight to turn. And this can be a really hard thing for a horse because when a horse goes kind of right brain, the thing that they want to do or they really need to do is be able to bend and turn towards what they're scared of. So what we need to do is kind of reprogram and help our horse learn how to be confident and straight. So the way most people, they play with lateral trace pressure is they use a set of false shafts. They use a PVC pipe or they'll use an old set of shafts off of a buggy or something like that. And the reason I don't like that is that inadvertently you can really teach your horse the wrong way to be in a vehicle. Because of the fact that the end of those shafts is loose, that you'll actually train the horse to push his hindquarter into the shaft, which is the exact opposite of what we want him to do. The way that a horse has to turn when they're in a vehicle is they have to reach over with their front leg and they have to yield with their hip. So the easiest way for us to teach that is actually with a 22-foot rope. What you do is you set up your 22-foot rope on a fence like this. I probably wouldn't do this on a temporary fence just because you'd create a whole new dynamic with it rattling and banging as you pulled on it. And then what I do is I play with my horse with this, and I want my horse to be able to have this come in here in a friendly way and not have it mean anything to it. If you think about the pressure that we talked about with our shafts, the horse needs to have it be friendly and then also porcupine. So it needs to have it be that he feels it along his sides and he doesn't yield to it, but then it becomes active and then he does yield to it. So what we want to do, the easiest way to play with it is like this. What we do is we bring in, and this replicates my left shaft, and it comes in along her shoulder, and I step over here, and what I'm doing is I'm looking at what is my horse's first thought. Is her first thought to brace into the pressure? Is her first thought to go forward? Or is her first thought to step over? I've seen some horses where they put them into this false shaft like this, and the horse tries to run them over. They go straight forward. They think that pressure along the long side of their body only means forward. I always tell people that's like you thinking that 1 + 1 = chicken. You really need to know 1 + 1 = 2, and we make it really clear to our horse that this pressure means step over. A forwards drift's okay, and a backwards drift's okay, but we really don't want it to be forward motion. There's a big difference between a horse drifting and feeling forward with the pressure and him really going forward because of the pressure. So what we can do is we can ask our horse to side pass till we get over here to the fence, and now we've got a nice little squeeze game where we can have a nice friendly pressure here with our horse. Then we can go up and over top, and then we could ask back the other way. And again, we're trying to read what is my horse's first response and first thought. The really cool thing with this too is you'll be able to see which zone of your horse, your porcupine game, is the worst. Because this is equally touching zones 5 through 3. Okay, and so I can tell with my horse here which part of her is getting left behind and which part's kind of a little sticky. So you can take that feedback from your horse and then you can apply that in your foundation. You can go, oh wow, I look at this and when I ask for it, my horse really yields his forequarters nice, but his hindquarter really gets left behind. For that horse to be able to really be a competent and confident driving horse, we really have to build up that porcupine game and get the horse really to have a much deeper level of understanding. So we can play with this like this and swing our horse, and this is just like what it'll be like when he's in a cart. It'll swing him along, and then we can play a little squeeze game against the fence. You can see that this wouldn't be a great idea to try with a younger horse or a less confident horse. You really need to have your horse where he has a really solid foundation and a good understanding of you and of pressure. The bad thing about using false shafts in this sort of application is that if it went bad, it goes really bad. The horse is going to follow him as far and as fast as he can run if you're using false shafts. The nice thing about this is that if it goes wrong, you can just let him go. And it's no big deal. And it's going to be the equivalent of a little drip of water versus a whole big bucket of water worth of trouble. What we're looking to get is we're looking to get our horse to where it shows a really high level of competence at this and a high level of understanding where I can easily side pass the horse off of a really clean isolation of steady pressure all along the side of its body. And we're really looking to see, is there a zone that's getting left behind? Is there a zone that's not being as responsive as the other ones? And if there is, then what the right thing to do probably will be to go back into our foundation and help our horse with that, because he's showing a lack of understanding right there. So as we're thinking about training our horse through the filter of accept and understand the harness, accept and understand the vehicle, and accept and understand leadership from zone 5, it's really important that we consider the difference between putting our horse into an open bridle or a blind bridle. Blinders are what we put on a horse that inhibits rearward view. I don't like the kind of blinders that really cover the sides of the eye and create it to where the horse cannot see except for a very narrow window in front of him. The kind of blinders I'm talking about, or blinkers, are the kind that just inhibit rearward view. The horse still has a really clear field of vision in front of him. So my perspective on it that I've gained over the years, and I get a lot of interest in what I think about it, because a lot of people think that the only way for a horse to be able to drive naturally is for him to be in an open bridle, or vice versa. I've met a lot of people, especially in the US, who feel like the only way for a horse to be able to safely drive is if he's in a blind bridle, and they think it's extremely dangerous for the horse to be in an open bridle. And I actually think that both opinions and both sides of that coin are wrong. The way that I like to look at it is I like to look at putting my horse in the bridle that best helps him, and the best bridle that's going to be perfect for that horse in that situation. I've had horses in the past where in one situation they really the best thing for them would be to be in an open bridle. And then that same horse in a different situation, the best thing would be for him to be in a blind bridle. So what I really like to do, and I really challenge people to do, is try and be an extreme middle of the roadist. Try and find a line there and try and understand what's best for your horse, and try and use your bridles relationally so you can do the best thing for your horse in each situation. So here we are with Amy and Sapphire, and what we're going to do is we're going to play with accepting and understanding the vehicle. It's really important as you play with this that you realize that different vehicles are going to have different considerations that you really need to think about. Some vehicles are going to really rattle and bang a lot, and they'll have a lot of noise to them, and then others, they're going to be really, really quiet. And so you need to make sure that each time that you get your horse into a new vehicle, you really prepare them for it in all aspects. And I treat each new vehicle like a whole new day. And so I always like to make sure that my horse really accepts and understands the sight and the sound of each new vehicle. The feel's going to stay pretty much the same with each vehicle, but the sight and the sound is definitely going to change. Give you a picture of the level of acceptance and understanding that we're looking to have with our horse is that, if you think about your horse and a fence, so to speak. If you look at this horse, its level of concern and overall angst towards the fence is 0. It's the same level of comfort as if it was standing over here in the middle of the arena, or if it was out in the middle of the pasture. It's all the same to him. It's just a natural part of life. He goes, oh, it's just the fence. And so what's really important is we want to think about the level of acceptance and understanding that we've got right here. We want to really, really play with that and try and get that exact same level of acceptance and understanding with the cart. So another really important thing to think about too right here is that if your horse is having a hard time with something else or another aspect of training him to drive, because of the fact that we've isolated these things into individual pieces, it's okay to play with other things. Just make sure that you don't neglect the part that you're having trouble with. So what we're going to do here with Amy and Sapphire is we're going to go ahead and introduce Sapphire for the first time to a vehicle. So we can go ahead and come on over here, sweetheart. I'm married to her, so I can call her sweetheart. It's pretty good. So right here we have a pretty standard 2-wheeled vehicle. This vehicle is going to be the best vehicle pretty much for most people to start with. I really encourage people not to start with a 4-wheeled vehicle or a 5-wheeled vehicle. The reason is that this vehicle, if your horse did drift, say a truck came by too fast or something like that, it would follow the horse. Whereas a 4 or a 5-wheeled vehicle is going to have a limit to how far it'll go. So this, you can see that as tight as your horse can turn it, it'll turn, and it won't have a limiting point. If you look at like a 4-wheeled vehicle, it'll only go so far and then it'll limit out, or a 5th-wheeled vehicle, or a 5-wheeled vehicle is what I call it, but it's a 5th wheel. So it has a 5th wheel plate and a cut under. It'll go pretty darn far, almost as far as a 2-wheeled vehicle, but not quite as far. So if you had to use 4 wheels, then use a 5th wheel vehicle. So good, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at our horse's level of acceptance and understanding of the vehicle while the vehicle is sitting still. This is really important. We don't wanna start off with it in motion, and especially not in motion towards the horse. So what we're gonna do is, you can go ahead and bring Sapphire in here. What you wanna do though is make sure you're really looking out for your horse. There's a lot of little goofy things on here that you could hook a halter onto. You could do a lot of things that they could change your life in a bad way, or change your horse's life in a bad way. So what we want to do is really look out for the horse and not get him into a position where he's going to get himself scared. So I wouldn't want to see a horse rubbing really hard against something that they could hook their halter into. I've seen horses do that and then rip it and then take off. So very good. So she's showing a nice little level of curiosity and sniffing, and who knows, maybe she'll want to chew my seat, and that's all right as long as it's not my seat. They can chew the seat, that's just fine. So very good. Perfect. So then Amy can then just play with the cart as if it were just an obstacle, right? And the idea would be to never, though, set your horse up to get hurt. So what I wouldn't want to do is I wouldn't want to send the horse over the shafts, and I wouldn't really want to play with getting the horse into the shafts until we were ready. So when we felt like the horse had a really, really nice level of acceptance and understanding here, good, you can see that this horse looks at this cart about the same way that she looks at the fence. She just goes, all right, what's next, right? She says it's just as natural as grass or crap in a field, you know what I mean? It's just very, very natural to her. So when we feel like, do you feel like that there, Aim? Don't feel like she's too worried? Good, so then we can start to introduce the cart in motion. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and grab a hold of the cart and I'll introduce it to her in motion. What I need to make sure I do, or I don't do, is move the cart towards my horse at first. Because if you do that, like we all know, that would put a lot of pressure on her. But if it's going away from her, we can peek into her curiosity. Some people's horses, you'll really want to play with this for a long time, and your horse, this will be a lot of pressure for him. I had a horse a few weeks ago that like just the cart sitting there was a ton for him to handle. And it took us a few days just to where he was comfortable enough to eat a cookie off the back step. So it's okay if you get that, because the greatest thing ever is he's telling you now. He's not telling you down the road when you're hitched to it and he's running off with it that he's scared of it, right? We want to know right now if he's going to be upset about it. Very good. So what we can do is I'm going to go ahead and grab the cart and I'll start pulling it and you can follow. That sound good? So I'm going to come over here.
And also really quick, honey, is it important to just get the horse confident with zone 1 or with all the zones with it just being static at first?
Yeah, that's really good. So glad I got you around there, honey. That's excellent. So it's really important that you get the horse accepting it through all zones, right? So from the tip of his nose to the tip of his tail, he needs to be okay with the vehicle standing still. We don't really want to, like if the horse was showing drift as it got into zone 3 or 4, then we say, oh, perfect. Then he's not quite ready, right? That just gives you a really good feedback of whether or not the horse is ready. So very good. So when we're in motion, then what I want you to do is I want you just to get her to accept it in zone 1. And then as she gets more confident, you can slowly bring her up through zone 2, 3, 4, and then bring her up along here. That make sense? So what I'm really going to try not to do is I'm going to try not to mirror my horse with the cart. Okay, so what I want her to think of is I want her to think of the cart as not related to her. That makes sense? I want her to think about, she stops her feet, the cart keeps going. She moves her feet, maybe the cart stops. Right? I don't want it to be that if she stops, the cart stops. We'll build up to that, but we don't want to start with that because that can really freak a horse out. So what we'll do, and I'll make sure that I keep Amy's horse in my eyes. So I can help her horse by the way that I run the cart. If I run the cart and don't pay attention, then I can set her up to have a really hard time. Very good. So I'm going to go ahead and set it in motion. And like they say with every relationship, communication is key. So I'll try and communicate pretty clearly here to my wife as we go along here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it over here and then we're going to kind of go in a circle. And we'll just look and see if she has a point where she kind of gets curious about it. I always say that if a horse is kind of curious about it, then we know that he still hasn't reached the level of acceptance that we're looking for. Curiosity is a really great thing. But what we're looking to have is we're looking to have the horse to where they're almost indifferent to it, to where it's just like the cart is the same as the fence, like what we were talking about. It's not a big deal to her. Very good. Perfect. So then if I stop, perfect. Excellent. People like to get really direct line about it, and they're like, here, get her up here where she's alongside the cart right away, you know, and it's not about that. It's just about her seeing it, smelling it, maybe even biting it, so that she can get used to the sight, the sound of the vehicle. Good, so then the cart moves, she stays there, and then she comes along. Very good. So we can see that she's pretty indifferent towards it. She's not real worried. Now what I wouldn't do is you'll notice that I have a fence over here. And what I wouldn't want to do is have Amy between the cart and the fence, or the horse between the cart and the fence. That would put a lot of squeeze on her. I don't really want to squeeze the horse right now. Right now I want to allow her to drift her feet as much as she wants to. We don't want to stop the drift. The drift is going to really, that's how she'll get her confidence, is by drifting. Right, Amy? Okay, good. Now if you felt like she was confident in zone 1, you could kind of bring it along zone 2 or 3. Good. Then maybe she'll go right on by. Good. Then circle around. Perfect. Very good. So you notice that this horse has very little to no drift that she's showing here. She's just kind of cruising through. She did look like she got a little less confident when it got up to about zone 3. So if I stop and then she keeps going around, maybe I can get her confidence up a little bit. And then as she comes around where she's looking at it, then it starts moving. And then it's in zone 1, 2, and then 3, and I stop. So approach and retreat. Now she sees it, and now I'll drag it along. Very good. Zone 3, good. Very good. So now we'll ask her to kind of keep it in zone 2, 3 for us and not just go all the way by. And then have her, perfect, have her back up or stop. There you go, have her kind of stop. Perfect. And then the cart keeps going. Very good. It's really important that you eat your Wheaties before you do this project, because it'll put a good amount of exercise on you. Very good. You can go again. Perfect. Very good. Atta girl. So this time, see if she can kind of cruise along right here along where the shaft will be. See if she can go right where she'll be on a vehicle. There we go. So I'm going to kind of move towards you. So the turns, you just have to be really aware of what you're doing, because you can accidentally put a lot of pressure on because you're stepping towards the horse. Very good. And then you can have her stop and the cart will just keep going. Very good. Perfect. Again, this should not look Western, because we're not trying to force it on the horse. We're just allowing the horse to get to where it thinks it's a pretty cool idea to be near the cart. That's kind of a comfy spot. And that it's no big deal. Perfect. Very good. That looks really good. So then the next thing that we're going to do, now that we've kind of looking like we're getting some acceptance of it, kind of following her a little bit, what I'll do is I'll turn the cart around. Then Amy, if you want to come back here. This is the best way that I know how to get a horse to where it's sight and sound as accurate as possible for being in zone 5, or for a vehicle in zone 5. Very good. So now we'll do the same thing on this other side. Good. It's important that we play with both eyes, so she sees out of both eyes here. So cruise along. Or actually, I gotta go the other direction, don't I? You're right, dear. I gotta go the other direction. All right, let me turn it around again. Magic of movies here. Okay, very good. Try again here, sweetheart. Sorry, my bad. Holy man. My mom's the president of a thing called DAM. It's Mothers Against Dyslexia. It's, yep, so I've got it bad. So if I ever do something dyslexic, you'll have to forgive me. There we go. This doesn't look quite so dyslexic. Very good, so she can come up along this side. Perfect. Very good, and we'll see how does she accept it on this side. Looks pretty good. Sometimes your horse, though, he'll have a really hard time switching eyes. And so you want to really make sure that you're getting it in both eyes plenty. And really evenly playing with this. Very good. So now, what I'll have you do is, yep, go and kind of have her go to where it should be straight in front of it. Very good. So the nice thing about this is that if the horse kind of felt like, see, we're in both eyes right there, like that was too much pressure with the cart right behind her, then she could jump forward and she could get away from it, because we're on one rein. We would never do this with 2 reins, because we could really teach the horse the wrong thing. Giving me my exercise this morning. So there we go, good. Perfect. So then we'll see if she can kind of look at it out the other eye. Excellent. So we're switching eyes. Very good. Very good. That's perfect. So the idea is we want to play with this a lot. You guys can play with this to your heart's content, because you won't set your horse up to be scared, and you just set him up to have a really good experience. So I always advise people to play with this a lot and to just really have a good time with it, getting the horse to really accept and understand the sight and the sound of the vehicle. So hopefully you're at the point where your horse is really starting to accept the cart, and it's starting to really see it as just a really friendly thing and a really friendly spot. You can, by all means, accentuate that in any ways possible. Just always really think about not setting yourself up or your horse up to get the wrong answer and to get themselves hurt. So the next thing that we're going to lead into is we're going to start to really get the horse to understand the cart, because the cart really demands a lot from the horse. And it's really honestly one of the most difficult things of training a driving horse, because of the fact that the vehicle prevents the horse from turning through the middle of its body as it moves. If you think about a horse as it naturally turns, Aim, if you just kind of naturally turn your horse this way a little bit. There you go. If you watch the way the horse naturally turns, it's pushing out with its ribs this direction, and it's reaching out with its outside foot to come around, and the hip is going out, if you can see that. Well, to be in a vehicle, the shafts require the horse to not move like that at all. If the horse moves like that, he'll do what we call binding in the cart, where he'll lock himself into it, and the only way, like say I was trying to turn this direction here to my right, and I try and turn him, and he tries to turn like what we did right there with Sapphire, through the middle of his body, and he tries to turn, he's gonna end up binding his body where his shoulder will be pressed hard against the right shaft, and his whole rib cage and his hip will be shoved against the left shaft. And the problem with that is that it sets the horse's feet up not to go this direction, it sets them up to go this direction. And when that happens, a lot of times what we see is that's what causes a horse to fall down. A lot of times if you hear old timers talk about a falling horse when they started him, it was probably a horse that was like that. I've seen it where he'll bind up in the cart and he doesn't know what to do, and his feet, the driver's trying to go this way harder, right? And they're trying to chase him this direction and get him to go that way. But all that it's doing is making him go this direction harder, and they'll actually fall down. So what we want to do is we want to really set our horse up to not have that happen. So the first part of that is we really need to look at the shape of our shafts and what are they going to require of our horse. Okay, so we've got that part first, but then the second part of it will be that the shafts are going to be friendly pressure, and they're also going to be steady pressure or porcupine pressure. So what we want to do is we want to play with our horse first to get them to where the shaft is a friendly thing to them, to where they can cozy up next to the shaft and have it just be a real natural, comfortable feel. Okay, so what we're going to do, Aim, with your horse is we're going to just try and make the shaft a real friendly pressure for her. So if you sent her over here kind of right in front of the wheel, and what we'll do is we'll just start with her zone 1. We'll just get her zone 1 to be comfortable with it, and then we'll slowly allow her to move it back down through her zones. Good, so she stepped in there real nice, and now you could just bring her forward a little bit and ask her to come a little closer. Good, very good. So again, the shaft is going to be friendly to my horse. I have to have it, because what happens, and I've seen this, is where the trainer only sets it up to be that the shafts are porcupine pressure and they're never a friendly pressure. And then what happens is the horse, he's in the cart cruising along real happy, and they go to turn and he feels that and he goes, oh, porcupine pressure, and he comes off of it and he hits this one. And he goes, oh, porcupine pressure, and he comes off of it and he goes, and it'll really, really confuse the horse. So we need to make sure that it has an inactive element and then also an active element to it too. So very good. So she wanted to kind of bring her nose over this way next to the vehicle here. Yep. Got a little fly bug in her. That's all right. Very good. So you can bring her front end over towards me. Good. And then hopefully the first place that she'll want to make contact with the shaft with will be her shoulder. So what I've learned is that it does not feel good to a horse for you to pet them with the shafts. These shafts are not real comfy to pet, but my hand is really soft and a nice thing to pet my horse with. So as she comes through, then I can make it a nice soft spot and just pet on her. And if it is touching her, I always try and have it be that my hand touches her first and not the shaft touching her first. So if she came forward just a little bit and came over this way, there we go. Bring her on over here. There we go. Good. Maybe she'll give us a little Spanish walk. Good. So then if I kind of pet on her, then I can kind of bring my shaft in like this. And then when I bring my shaft in, I'm trying to bring it in to where my hand touches her, not my shaft. So my hand is touching my horse, not my shaft right there. Good. And then she was perfect. Good. And then she can go ahead and go around one more time. We'll see if she can find that sweet spot again for us. Bring her in. Very good. Very good. And then you can see that this part of her body is closest to it, so I can just pet her with the shaft. Very good. We can allow the shaft to actually touch her. Very good. But my hand makes a buffer between the shaft and the horse's flesh. Very good. Good. So the first part of what a shaft needs to mean to a horse and his understanding of a shaft should be friendly pressure. Good. So can you see if you can bring her shoulder over towards me? Good. And so then when she comes over, I just make this a real nice and sweet little spot right here. If the horse was to find a lot of discomfort in this and it really panicked them, the exit is straight forwards. Okay, so the default answer that we really want to help our horses find is if they get lost or really confused, it's either stop or go straight forwards. We wouldn't want to side pass the horse towards us away from the shaft. We would really want to build in a default number of go forwards, because that's where safety is really going to be for the horse. So we'll come in and I'll pet her with the shaft here. And you notice my hand again is the buffer. Very good. Perfect. That looks really good. So now, she looks really good for that. How's that? There, Aim? Good? Okay, good. So now, if you wanted to go ahead and send her and bring her around, and we'll do the other side. So it's really important that we play with this on both sides of our horses, so that we can make sure we get their confidence with both shafts. So I come over here and I create the control. This is how I control it and make sure it's not a big deal and that it doesn't bump her or hit her. Very good. So as she comes in, then I'll pet on her, tell her how smart she is hanging out here. And all this is just a friendly game with a vehicle and a friendly game with the vehicle touching her. You can also remember to playing with the lateral trace pressure with a 22-foot rope. That sort of thing will really help. If you felt like your horse was really scared of this, then going back to the lateral trace pressure with the 22-foot rope is really, really valuable to this. Very good. So then if she wanted to step a little more forward for us. Good. Very good. Now I can come in. And again, it's my hand that pets the horse. The idea is that this shaft at first is not going to feel real great to her. And so we want to build up to it, whereas my hand feels really nice to her. Very good. Perfect. And then you can send her around and back to me. The important thing is that we're playing a lot of approach and retreat with this. We're not just going, okay, you gave us an inch, we'll take a mile. We really want to be that she gives us an inch and we say, wow, that was the greatest inch I've ever had. Thank you so much. And then she goes, well, shoot, maybe I'll give you a mile. Instead of just like a lot of people, they'd get a little bit with it and then they'd overdo it. So what we want to really do is be guilty of kind of taking it real easy with it and making this real sweet and soft and really, really making sure she feels like she gives a little bit and we really appreciate it. So go ahead and side pass her over towards me a little more. Very good. So the shafts, we put the pressure on one at a time. We do the left side and then we do the right side. We don't want to do both at the same time until we really felt like our horse was really accepting and understanding this as a friendly game along the side of their body. So I also would not want to really teach her to move off of these until I felt like I had her confidence. It wouldn't help her confidence if I started asking her to move off of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and switch horses over to a horse that's a little more confident with the shafts, and we'll show you kind of how to start to, once we have their confidence, we can start to ask them to yield to it with a porcupine game. So it's really important that we're not asking a horse to yield from the shaft pressure until the horse is really accepting of it in a friendly way. So with Amy's horse, it wouldn't have been a wise decision for us to have continued on and asked the horse to yield from the shafts, just because it was not yet really fully accepting having them along the sides of its body. So that's why we brought in Peaches here. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll make sure first that in a friendly way the shafts work and that she can have them touching her, which is very good. Very good. So now what I'll do is I'll just really softly ask her to yield and step over, and we'll look to see. Perfect. Very good. And again, if the horse needed to go anywhere, it would be forward. Okay, so if we did this and it got to be too much for her, then we would just really ask her to go ahead and step forward. So go ahead and just back her up just a half a step for me there, dear. Perfect. Good. The idea is after we ask the horse to yield to it, is that we always go back to it being a friendly pressure. It's really important that we're not trying to get the horse to where he jumps off the shaft. We just want him to go and feel it along the side of his body, and then when it becomes active, when it puts energy onto him, then he softly yields to it. So we'll go again. The shaft is on in a friendly way, and then we'll softly add a little bit of pressure. Very good, so that was perfect. So that was her hindquarters. And then we'll come over here, we'll ask her to yield again. Perfect. And you'll notice that she's kind of drifting forward. That's a really good thing. We really want the horse to drift forward as we do this instead of reaching or coming backwards, because as we drive and we turn, we want the horse to reach out and go forward in the turn. We really don't want him backing through the turn. Very good, dear. You want to come around and we'll do the other side? So it's really important that we play with this on both sides before we start putting the two together. If you felt like you had a horse that really had a hard time with this, by all means, it's really great to go back within your foundational stuff and to play with it there, and to play with it with a 22-foot rope, because of the fact that I hope everybody can see that this is pretty safe, but it could always go wrong. So, so it's really important that you set yourself and your horse up to have a really nice little experience with it. So we'll come over here, we'll just ask for it to be kind of a friendly pressure to her. And she'll feel the shaft, and then it'll become active. So it's asking her shoulder to step over right now. Right there, perfect. And then we'll see if we can find a nice relaxation again and have it be friendly again. So then it's touching her again. Good. And you'll notice that it's touching her, it's gonna go from her front to her back, to her front to her back. And her side will be in there too. And the nice thing is you're getting all the pieces of what the shaft is going to ask her to do in isolation. This is the kind of thing that's really, really nice to play with your horse on, and that'll really help them a lot. So the next thing we're going to play with is we're going to go ahead and play with introducing both shafts at the same time to the horse. This can be extremely dangerous. We're not going to have a harness on the horse. We're going to introduce this to the horse with just the two shafts. So just make sure that when you do this, you don't have your horse wearing a harness, because you might get the harness caught on the shafts. And also remember that if there's ever a bad point, the exit is forwards. And we'll really encourage the horse to go forwards. So if we played with this, then what we'll do is if you just stand there, dear, I'll just back my cart up. I'll lift up the shafts as if I was going to hitch her to the vehicle.
Would it be better if I was standing on the same side as you?
It's not really of a whole lot of consequence. So. Yeah, I mean, I want you to be where you can get her straight. So actually, if anything, I'd rather you be straight in front of her. That's really good. There, but not walking forward. There you go. So the idea is that if this went bad, if this was, and a lot of times, like, this is enough pressure for a horse right here. And if this was enough pressure for your horse, you just say, oh, okay, let's lead him forward. If he was going yellow light or red light, then you say, okay, do not pass go, do not continue. So, but if your horse is giving you a green light where he's going, oh, I'm all right with that, then you can come on up here and you can have the shafts on him. Now just remember that you've got pressure on both sides of your horse now. So where this goes wrong is the horse feels it on one side and he jumps over this way and gets bound in the cart. So what's really important is Amy's really reading my horse. Notice my horse is licking its lips, nice and relaxed, but we're really reading the horse that if she got nervous, Amy would back her feet up and she would lead the horse straight out, okay? So what we'll do is we've got it real high, and when it's real high up here, then we'll introduce it to the far hip. So the idea being that if this went wrong, I could go like this and she'd be out of the shafts. Okay, so the far hip, I can come over here and introduce it to the near hip. Then I could kind of bring it down along the far side. Very good. And then if it ever went wrong, then Amy, go ahead, just lead her straight forward. Then Amy can just lead the horse straight forward, and it's no big deal. And what's really important is that you make sure you have a really clear picture in your mind that the exit is forwards. So at first we're going to make sure that the shafts are a really friendly thing to our horse, and then we're going to develop a porcupine pressure game with it too. So, but we don't want to do that until we really felt like the horse could go into the shafts and be really confident just having them along the sides of their body in a friendly way. So if I back the cart up and you can bring her back in there, dear. Very good. Perfect. So then we'll come in again. Our horse is really confident with it. Very good. So if we wanted to add a little bit of porcupine pressure to it, then what we do is we'll go ahead and put a little bit of pressure. And what I want to have happen, Aim, is I want her to step about 1 step over and then forward. Okay? That makes sense? Yep. Very good. So we'll get, see, we're not really well set up right now because she's kind of looking at me. There we go. Good. We'll get her looking straight. Very good. And then I'll just softly put a little bit of pressure. And then we're going to go forward and out, like that. Okay, the idea being that we really want to always give our horse a wide open door. Okay, she has a wide open door and she needs to always be thinking, okay, I'm panicking, where do I go? And the answer is go straight. If she learns that, it'll make this a lot easier for her. So if you brought her underneath here, very good. Just a little more. Come on over here, Peaches. There we go. Good. Perfect. Perfect. Good. So we can bring the shavs in. You can go in front of her again. Good. I'll bring my shavs in. Now this time, we'll ask for a couple of steps. Ready? So I'm going to push a little pressure so it's friendly first. Now it becomes active and it's asking her to yield. Very good. Like that. Good. And then forward. So you can play with this and develop this up to a point where you could actually cause your horse to pivot all the way around in a circle and really prepare him for the shavs. The idea again is that if it all went wrong, you have a really safe way to get out. And that's really an essential piece to this. So what we want to do is we want to build this up until our horse is really, really confident with it. And then we can start talking about driving them and actually having them in a vehicle. But just remember that each piece of this puzzle is a piece to the puzzle. And if one of the pieces or one of the isolations isn't strong, you need to go back and rebuild that and just put a lot of attention into it. It's, and it's okay to play with some of these other things if you're having a hard time with, like say you're playing with the long lining or you're playing with the accept and understand the harness, then it's okay to continue to play with accept and understand the vehicle. Just don't gloss over something that's a really important point. So what we're going to do next is we're going to get into long lining our horse and looking for acceptance and understanding from zone 5.